Good evening. My name is Mimi Boblick. I'm with Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, or PAVE. I'm just going to give it one more minute while we are having more people join. In the meantime, our colleague Christina Curel, who is our education manager, is going to put up a poll or two. If you could kindly answer it while you're waiting, I would appreciate it. And we'll just give it 1 minute. Christina, you have one or two?
What'd you say?
You have one or two do you want to put up? Just one today?
Oh, just one right now, and there's one at the end.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think we can begin so that I think we have a lot to cover tonight. Again, my name is Mimi Boblick. I'm with PAVE. I am, like many across the country, I'm a volunteer. I happen to be one of the founding partners of PAVE, along with the founders of PAVE, who are three incredible women who started the organization. I joined them a few months later because I had a personal discovery of my own in my own family, and it really set me off to a journey of trying to fight the youth vaping epidemic with them. So Parents Against Vaping works, just so for people who don't know, we're a national organization. We are really the national voice fighting the youth vaping epidemic now. And we work on two fronts, advocating for changes in laws, particularly ending the sale of flavored e-cigarettes and all menthol and other flavored tobacco products, and also educating parents and other adults who care about kids. Again, we're volunteers. We are really, our mission really is about protecting kids. So we're not trying to tell parents what to do or adults what to do in terms of their own personal decisions, but we hope tonight will be helpful and illustrate the need for us all to really protect our kids and also help better communicate with them, which I know is sometimes a challenge for all of us. I am joined tonight by two incredible experts on this topic, Shannon Gunter and John McAteer, who are both with the New York Center for Living. And I'm going to have them just talk a little bit about what they're doing. We initially met them because they actually have a program they're going to talk about near the end, which has to do with vaping addiction treatment and has had positive results. So we started a conversation and we wanted to figure out a way to partner. And we thought this would be a great idea to sort of have this panel to allow people to understand, first of all, what motivational interviewing is, which we'll talk a little bit about, and just have them share their expertise with us about what parents can do and what other adults can do and how best to interact with youth. So our goal tonight is really to take what these and other experts have said and help us sort of translate it into what parents can do and how we can best support our kids in this process. So I will let them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about New York Center for Living, and then we'll move on. Do you want to start, Shannon?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. My name is Shannon Gunter. I'm a primary therapist at New York Center for Living. I work mainly in our adolescent program, and I co-facilitate our nicotine cessation program with my colleague here, John McAteer. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.
And hi, everybody. My name is John McAteer. I'm the coordinator for the young adult program, and I also oversee and co-facilitate the Nip It in the Bud. It's vaping education, support, and cessation program with Shannon. And we're going to get into the program a little bit later. New York Center for Living is a medically monitored outpatient substance use and mental health treatment program where our treatment offerings really run the gambit of, assessment in case we think there might be an issue or if a parent is concerned, all the way up to more intensive levels of care. So I think that our Nip It in the Bud program kind of goes under the heading of sort of that early intervention type program where we can get at disorders before they get too out of control.
All right, thanks, guys. So before we get into communication techniques and strategies, John and Shannon are going to talk about how we got there, right? So this question comes from a lot of parents. How did my kid get so hooked on this? And is it possible to quit? So I just want to have them talk a little bit about what nicotine does to the developing body and developing brain, because it is so critical to why it is so hard for kids to quit.
Yeah, so we start off here, just to kind of get our bearings in regards to what our youth are going through, sort of from a neurological development perspective. As some of you might know, our brains mature from the back to the front, right? In the back, we have all of what we call the ancient brain, the limbic system, which is involved in like fight, flight, or freeze, whereas in the front of the brain, we have our judgment and reasoning and empathy. Interesting note, the leads of neurological development were actually car rental agencies, where they realized that when they rented to youth under the age of 26 for females, under the age of 25 for males, they found that they were getting into a lot more accidents. Whereas once they hit 25 for males and 26 for females, those incidents happened a lot less. And that's because as our brains mature, we have more access to judgment and reasoning. So it's interesting that the last things to develop are that decision making, impulse control, empathy, right? That ability to say no to peer pressure, right? And when we engage in substance use, we're really activating that limbic system, right? Which is the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and all of that has to do with emotional memory, emotional regulation, like I said before, fear, anger, fight or flight, and is consistently seeking a reward for behavior. So yeah, next slide.
So, and something we want to talk about that also informs the adolescent brain is Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory, where he hypothesizes that every single age in our lives, we have a range of it that in which we're forced to tackle some sort of identity battle. So for adolescents, specifically for adolescents, the battle is identity versus role confusion. This is sort of an ego crisis of how we define ourselves and how we're really fitting in with the world. We have one foot in adulthood and one foot in childhood, and that is extremely awkward. So adolescence is very awkward in that way, where we are sort of, and I say we because most of us, if not everyone here, has been an adolescent at one point, but we are sort of expected to demonstrate that we are young adults and are responsible, but we feel like we're treated like children. So really, according to Erikson, the main task of an adolescent is to figure out what is my identity, so that I'm not confused in my role. And what often happens is that when we are really searching for that identity, we might go to the quickest thing that makes us feel secure. If we feel that our family, our caretakers are rejecting us, we will turn to our peers, and whatever is happening in that peer group and we feel accepted, we're going to go towards that. So this can often result in teens acting out in other behaviors that were not happening before. And often nicotine is part of that. If I feel like I fit in with my friends and this makes me feel comfortable, I'm gonna use nicotine. So role confusion and that versus identity is a huge part of this, and what informs the adolescent experience.
If I could just interrupt and say, I forgot to tell you at the beginning that we do have some questions in this that are already embedded in it that have come from all of you in the registration process. But if you have other questions, we will certainly try to answer them. Just you can put them in the Q&A box and we'll try and get to them at the end, or sprinkle throughout if they're relevant to the current conversation. And if we don't get to them tonight, we're happy to answer any questions offline as well. So thanks for that. Sorry.
That's all good. Thank you so much, Mimi. It's important. It's important that, you know, we understand that, you know, how did my kid get hooked on this, right? And it's really understanding that nicotine specifically, especially nicotine ingested through an e-cigarette or a vape device, is really the best way to get hooked on nicotine. You know, and for anyone that knows anything about nicotine, it's really, you know, we can call it brain poison for youth. During our development, during our adolescent development, we're coming out of a place where all of our synapses are firing at the most capacity. And that's why they say that if you're going to learn a language, learn it when you're young. That's because you have so much area to learn new things and to actually retain them. When we hit adolescence, we go through what's called synaptic pruning, where through our development, we start getting rid of all of the synapses that we don't use regularly. The advantage of that is that we can really instill some healthy behaviors. The disadvantage of that is that if we introduce nicotine, that will definitely increase the likelihood of us developing a habit devoted to nicotine, because those neurons are getting supported, those synapses are getting supported. So, you know, I mentioned, you know, brain development at the age of 25. So we are, and nicotine really targets the cellular activity in the brain that's responsible for attention, learning, memory, all of this stuff that's so important in adolescence. We've also seen that it can worsen anxiety, irritability, impulsivity. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but it's interesting to know that, you know, we're getting research that nicotine can cause anxiety, irritability, depression, impulsivity, whereas it seems to alleviate that in the present. Down the road, it actually exacerbates those conditions, but we'll get into that in a bit. Oh, we'll get into that now. So, you know, it's very interesting, right? So as an adolescent, I care about what's going on right in front of me, what's happening right now, the immediate gratification. You know, something that I say, full disclosure, I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. And quite often I say that immediate gratification takes way too long sometimes, right? So as we know, nicotine is a highly addictive substance, but its level of addictiveness varies on how it's delivered. And this is so very important. If an adolescent smokes a cigarette, right, they are getting varying amounts of nicotine with every, you know, we call it a pull on an e-device, any drag, pull, and every time they inhale, because the nicotine is inconsistent throughout the tobacco of the cigarette. When I pick up a Juul, or when I pick up any e-vaping or e-cigarette or vaping device, that is giving me a consistent delivery of nicotine every time I inhale, right? So I'm getting that 5% nicotine every single time. And we'll go, I think we have a slide for this, but every pod has enough nicotine or the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So, you know, it's very important. And so what this graphic shows is that in the short term, right, immediate gratification, I'm feeling relaxed. I might be feeling a feeling in the back of my throat. A lot of the youth that we've worked with in regards to vaping behavior, a lot of them say that they miss that feeling in the back of their throat. And so we help them apply, you know, sort of a toolbox to help them with that. So in the moment, you know, it might feel really good. I might feel that alleviation of depression, alleviation of anxiety. If I struggle with attention deficit disorder, all of a sudden I'm really locked in and I'm really focused. However, that dissipates very quickly. Over time, we're talking about the impact of these high levels of nicotine as causing dependence, respiratory issues, lung damage. So it's very important that as parents, we know as much as we possibly can, that we know the facts, right? And that's very important. And we're going to get into why knowing the facts is very important, because when I'm talking to my youth about this, I don't want to be coming out of my feelings, right? Because if I come out of my feelings, I chances are I'm going to get turned off by the youth. But if I'm coming out of facts, that is something that my child could definitely relate to.
Yeah, you talk a lot about the short-term gain for kids. I think, we hear all the time, well, it helps me concentrate while
Yeah.
I'm at school, or, if I'm studying for a test, it helps me concentrate. But what they don't understand is it's hijacking their system, and eventually it's going to be harder for them to concentrate, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really happy that you brought in that word, because it really is a brain hijack. And it's interesting. I was talking to this high school about, about doing a vaping presentation for their middle school and for their high school, right? And I just naturally assumed, okay, so we'll do all the prevention stuff with the middle school and all of like the real kind of implementation stuff with the high school. And they say, oh, no. Our population of vapors is starting in middle school. So actually the education needs to start in grammar school, which really, really blows my mind. But anecdotally, my daughter is 11, she's in 6th grade, and she experiences kids vaping in the restroom.
Yeah, we hear this, and I agree with you. We're told to start as young as 10 and even younger. With our kids, with cigarettes, we started when they were 3. Walking down the street, we'd see someone smoking and we'd have a conversation. I think, to demonize it. And by the time they were 15 or whatever, they would never have picked up a cigarette. But an e-cigarette, no problem, because it
Right.
looks cool and they thought it was healthy and safe.
Mhm.
So very different. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah.
So how do I know, or so what do I see in an adolescent? And Shannon, feel free to jump in here. What do I see in regards to the behavioral impact of vaping in adolescents? I don't know if you want to take over there.
Yeah, I mean, it goes along with what, John, you're already saying, which is that, vaping doesn't necessarily cause all 4 of these points, but it definitely makes an adolescent more susceptible to being to having behavioral issues. But here we really want to highlight that that vaping, especially in a chronic way, you'll notice your kid is really irritable. This is often because of withdrawal, and it's understandable. They're not getting the substance that they might chemically depend on to be functioning. So that is very common. Risk taking, this is again not these aren't black and white answers, but we often see adolescent will be more susceptible to be taking risks, and that goes back to the brain and that kind of reward seeking part of the brain. Restlessness, sleeplessness, we find that a lot of kids are vaping right before bed. That is going to completely keep them wired all night, and then they wonder why they can't sleep, and then of course they need nicotine to get them going right when they get up. So sleep is completely disturbed. I would also add that appetite, which we'll mention in a later slide. And then poor performance. So of course, the whole point of using nicotine a lot of the time is that hey, mom, dad, it helps me focus. I need this. And then we notice that it's really not the best solution in the long term. And we get it. And we'll go into this, but it's very effective in the moment. It's very short-term effective. And that is something as we go into the motivational interviewing piece, that's very important to validate. But again, long-term, it's not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there are, as many of us already know, so many other health impacts to vaping long-term, lung issues. In terms of COVID-19, you're really weakening your immune system and are more susceptible to disease. There's a whole list here: allergy, seizures. We work very closely with a pulmonologist, and I can promise you the list goes on and on here. So again, like an adolescent will not be very receptive to a list like this, but this reinforces the need to do this type of work.
Yeah, and we hear parents occasionally say, well, at least my child's not smoking, so I'm going to encourage the vaping. But we're here to tell you the science is not pointing to that, especially for kids. Again, we're not going to talk about what adults, the health harms of adults.
Mhm.
But for kids, we know this is not safe for developing lungs, developing hearts, and other organs, frankly.
Yeah.
No, if there's any takeaway at all in terms of a myth buster, vaping is not safer than smoking. We cannot reinforce that enough.
And it's important that, and I don't know, it's important that we recognize, although it's called vaping and we hear vapor, we think, oh, it's water vapor. It's not. It's oil. It's aerosolized oil. And for the comparison I was given is that if you're cooking in your kitchen and you're doing a stir fry, right? You get these bursts of steam and smoke, and what's happening is you're aerosolizing the water in the vegetables and also any kind of oils that you used, and they get dispersed throughout your kitchen, right? So that there might be a greasy film on your stove afterwards. But imagine heating oil to the point and just bringing them into your lungs, and then it comes back to a certain temperature where it becomes that viscous substance again. That's all resting in your lungs, and it stays there. And an aerosol also denotes that it carries something. It's a transport, and we find that it's transporting, like it says here, flavor chemicals, depending upon where youth are getting their vapes. They could have lesser quality oils, have something called vitamin E acetate, which is harmful when heated and aerosolized. So we have to understand that all vapes work off of some sort of filament that's made out of metal. And as that erodes over time, bits of, I think, chromium and nickel also get carried into our youth's lungs when they vape.
Yeah. And we can't tell what's a real, what's a counterfeit vape and what's not, right? And it's Russian roulette, and even the real ones are not healthy, but certainly the counterfeit ones could be even deadly. So
absolutely,
and we've seen that, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one that comes up all the time. How do I know if my child is vaping? I think if you two could bring us through some of the signs and symptoms. I think one thing that's really confusing for adults is that teens exhibit so many of these behaviors without any addiction. So it's hard to know what is just them being normal teenagers and going through teenage stuff and what is, real. But I can tell you personally, I missed many of these signs before I really knew what was going on. And I wish I had had this list before, because I think I would have picked it up. But if you could let us know what you think some of the most important signs to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that anecdote. And of course, John might be able to speak better to this as a parent, but and again, we don't want to assume anything, because that can be harmful to assume that our kid is being sneaky, and that will lead to a lot of defensiveness. But there are some signs that may lead to this being the truth. The candles, like sweet smells, trying to mask a smell. You can also sometimes smell the vape itself if they use flavors, like if you're smelling something sweet like watermelon or mint, and you don't know where it comes from. It might be the smell of the flavor they're using. Secretive behavior in general, closing the door or going to the restroom a lot. The mucousy membranes, that's a big one, like a lot of like hacking mucus or blowing your nose. Of course, there can be complications like mouth sores and nosebleeds. That's more, I would say, extreme. It might happen less towards the beginning of nicotine use. And then of course, like paraphernalia, like often vapes are disguised in all sorts of ways so that kids can use them at school. They can put them in their sweatshirt. They're devices that look like USB drives. So if seeing any sort of strange device that you don't recognize might be worth looking into. I mean, there's so many different kinds. There's likely a chance that it's a vape, honestly. They make them in all sorts of ways. And then, as I mentioned earlier, changes in sleeping patterns. Honestly, like cold-like effects, it was very difficult at the beginning of this pandemic because some of the presenting symptoms were very similar to the COVID-19 symptoms 2 years ago and how that was presenting. So very similar to that, which is really scary actually, and very unsettling when you think about the circumstance when that was happening at the very beginning. But you know, that's also worth a conversation as it pertains to our current situation as well. Again, looking specifically at number 8 right now, that anxiety, irritability, you know, if they're not getting sort of the fix they need, that's definitely going to come out. I notice all the time that young people who vape will be very they're not very sneaky about being obvious that they need to get out of a room or a situation. They will get out of there as fast as they can, run to the bathroom, whatever, take care of what they need to take care of. Appetite changes as well. The jitteriness, oftentimes, I would say this doesn't present as much if they're used to vaping, but if, for sure when they first start, that nicotine, especially taking it in through an e-cigarette device, as John was saying, that's a lot of nicotine at once that can definitely present as jitteriness. And then spending. There are ways to deliver it to the home. It's really not hard to buy here in New York, especially. It's not hard to get. So sort of like if you see a purchase made at a smoke shop, that one's pretty obvious right there. But you know, there are ways also like Venmoing friends. Just any sort of money in excess that's going out, maybe on a regular basis, would be worth looking into.
Vapes are cheap, but still worth checking out and asking your
Yeah.
kid if you notice
Yeah.
unusual behavior. All right, so now we want to get into the communication stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, I've heard this term motivational interviewing. I actually did a little reading up on it because I wanted to be prepared, but I'm hoping that you two can explain sort of the tenets of motivational interviewing in the professional context, and then more importantly, tell us how we as parents can use the concepts and techniques of motivational interviewing for our own benefit in terms of communicating with our own kids.
Yeah, and it's important. So so William Miller and Dr. Rolnick created motivational interviewing as sort of a call to action, where you know, Carl Rogers started off, you know, saying that, oh well, you know, the answers lie inside the person. We just have to give them enough time and space to come to those conclusions. Miller and Rolnick were like, well, we don't have time for that, right? So we need a much more structured way to make the environment conducive to, and using specific tools to help tease out the information that we're looking for, and to help guide that conversation where it really promotes behavior change, right? So when we think about addiction treatment, especially the what we can call the old school of addiction treatment, we're thinking of confrontation and you need to change and it's a moral issue. But motivational interviewing takes a much different technique where you're not seen as, you know, therapist and client. You're looking at it as a partnership. You're in this together, right? Where we're looking at the client as really the expert in their own lives. So it's really that collaboration that's most important. So in this context, it's an opportunity for parent to collaborate with kid in regards to how best do we tackle this, right? And we also allow our clients in motivational interviewing to create the goals that are important for them, right? A lot of the time in our more intensive programs, if our clients are referred by probation, right, chances are their goals are not to stop smoking weed, but their goal might be to get their probation officer off their back. Well, how do you think we can do that, right? What is one step that we can take to do that? Maybe kind of give us a negative urine and we'll take it from there. Another big thing is client autonomy, allowing them to have control over this and understand, taking a strengths perspective, that they really have the skills and the drive to be able to make these behavior change, right? And when a person feels responsible for their actions, they feel it lends a certain amount of confidence towards their ability to change a behavior. Right. And so the spirit of motivational interviewing, I'm sorry, am I being, I don't know, Shannon, did you want to?
Oh, go for it. Go for it. You got
it. So it's what we want to do. Like I said before, it's really the spirit of motivational interviewing is really kind of focusing on that partnership, right? Where we are working together to tackle this issue, right? There's also a level of acceptance, right? And this might be a difficult part for parents. I know I struggle with it all the time, is that sort of non-judgmental space that I need to create when managing this with my child, where I do accept them as, a person that is still trying to work everything out and trying to identify what is the best course of action towards a behavior. You see there evocation, right? So it's not me saying you need to change, you need to change, you need to change, but really asking the right questions to get the answers out of the child, right? I'm looking to evoke that motivation, evoke that importance, evoke that confidence in being able to make this behavior change. And of course, everything is done with compassion, right? I don't know the stressors that my kids are really up against. So it's important that I actively listen with compassion, with, what they call in internal family systems, they call it a compassionate curiosity towards my child's experience. So all of that, it really kind of embodies that motivational interviewing spirit.
And one of the things that we really feel strongly about is that these kids were targeted. In 2017, Jewel and others made a huge push, social media marketing, it was a really heavy push towards our kids. And it was marketed to, with no safety warnings, nothing like that. And so our kids were kind of fooled. We say they were jeweled. I mean, they were really fooled into thinking these products were okay. And so I don't know if that sort of helps them deflect the blame a little bit, but it's also gives the parents sort of, an opportunity to not judge, because really it was when I say that it wasn't their fault. I mean, they were really targeted by big tobacco.
Oh yeah, and that's a really helpful point to bring up when practicing compassion, is that those real facts about that. I think that's a great point. And so along with compassion and I love compassion and curiosity, those are 2 C's we should all have in mind in our work, and this will be really helpful for parents, I think. But we want to think about this process into 4 parts. So really the engaging part is the foundation of motivational interviewing. The goal is really to establish a productive working relationship between you and your child. You can do this through active listening. I suggest in person. I mean, there are ways to be an active listener and engaged, I suppose, over text or a phone call, but have these conversations in person, sit down with each other, and try and really make an effort to understand their experience and what it is like for them. Highlight their strengths in the situation, bringing up, your awareness that they were jeweled several years back. And a lot of this is a big ploy from big tobacco. Like that is a big truth here. But you're trying to understand where are they coming from and what's going on. The focusing piece is more about it's about both of you and both of you finding a shared purpose and understanding together. This is more of your ability to move into it gives you kind of permission to be a little more direct about the change. It sort of focuses the goal and what you're doing here. It says here guiding a client to a target behavior. So that's when you can focus a little bit on that, but then evoking is where you sort of bring out their motivation. So again, as John was saying, it's not their motivation to quit. That's the last thing they want to do, because as they feel it's helping them with something, or they don't feel confident in quitting. That's something else. Is even teens who think maybe I do need to quit, they're so scared to, and they don't feel that they're able to or have that confidence. But let's say it's more of the former example. Maybe their goal is to complete high school. Maybe they're an athlete. They want to be a good performer in their sport. That's a great place to start. I always like to think long term. Like, what is your goal? Maybe not in life, that might be a little too big, but do you have school goals? Are you involved in some sort of extracurricular? Do you want to do well in that? Are you trying to accomplish something for college? Whatever it is, we know the person, the parent, as therapists, we know that there is a connection between quitting, for example, and reaching that goal, but they need to come to that conclusion on their own. So you can work through the pros and cons of changing the behavior versus keeping the behavior, being able to validate why you might not want to quit, but also, at the same time, in the same space, highlighting what might be helpful with quitting. And then for planning, I would say, you might not want to jump into this right away, but this sort of explores the how of change, and you supporting the commitment to change, developing attainable goals that might help them. So, they're not going to put down the vape tonight. That might not be an attainable goal and a good part of the planning section, but maybe they'll agree to talk with you about it again. Maybe they'll agree to be more honest with you instead of being sneaky and hiding it. Maybe you can start somewhere a little closer. And it might feel uncomfortable because as a parent, you're so worried and anxious that it might feel uncomfortable to keep that space open of like, oh, wow, we're open about the fact that you're vaping and I know it. But it's going to be more effective that way. Like the phrase, it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is a marathon and you're both going to get to the finish line, but it's not going to happen right away. So try and be gentle with yourselves as well in that planning process and not try and push it too fast.
I have a great follow-up. Oh, sorry. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no. I mean, I really like what you said, Shannon, in regards to, I think that, there's certain traps that we can get into when we're practicing motivational interviewing. One of them is premature focusing, right? Where we shoot to the goal too quickly, right? Without them kind of following along, and then we've lost them, right? That's when the defenses are up. And something else that Shannon had mentioned is one of the tools that I love to use with with adolescents is something called decisional balance, right? So, again, kind of thinking about that compassionate curiosity. Tell me, what do you like about it? What do you enjoy about vaping? Tell me, like, I really want to know, like, what do you get out of it? Right. And it could be social acceptability. It could be all of my friends are doing. It could be how it makes me feel, how it focuses. And that also that is definitely engaging. And it also kind of throws off the youth because they expect us to be like, vaping's bad and you shouldn't do it. But, when we kind of approach it from the perspective of, I really want to understand what you're getting from it. Right. And that could also, as a parent, inform me in maybe they're self-medicating some social anxiety or something like that, which is very helpful. Part of decisional balance is not only finding out what they like about it, but what are, what we say, like, what are the good things and what are the not so good things? We're not saying bad, we're saying not so good things. We don't want it to be judgmental. And this kind of really helps them weigh out, what is working and what is not in this behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's also an audience question that could tie in really well here. It's that, is it valuable to relate your own experience with tobacco/vaping or drugs and alcohol in a parallel conversation? I would say absolutely. I don't know, John, how you would answer that in terms of the timeline of it, but any way you can let them know that you're engaged with them, it's relatable. Like, even if you don't have experience with necessarily the same substance, you can relate to what it's like to not fit in or feel like you have to do something, or that you're using something that's helpful to get through a stressful situation. I think that's extremely, if you're open to doing that, that's great. They're gonna see you as more of a human being more than they might, because they see often parents as authority figures that don't understand them. And back to their developmental stage and that biosocial theory, they believe in a way that they're the only person in the world who feels the way they're feeling. That's a big part of their development. So I think bringing in your own experience is a really positive way to help them see no, you're in this together, and you know what it's like, and you're not mad at them. You're both two humans that are facing this problem together.
That's a great point. Yeah, thank you. So all related, but the next question that came in is, how do I know where to start? And also, how do I know how severe my child's dependency is? How, sometimes it's really hard to know, especially because addiction hides in the shadows, right? And it's very secret. We've heard of kids, keeping their vapes under their pillow at night because they can't get through the night without vaping. To your point, Shannon, they need it at night to go to sleep, but then they're so jacked up, then in the morning they need it to wake up. So sometimes we don't really know how dependent a child is, and they may not share it with you. They may not even know themselves. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's interesting. We went over sort of like the warning signs, how do I know, or what are the signs or symptoms of my child vaping. And I think that that's really important. In regards to severity, I think it's important that if we, best case scenario, we have an open and honest relationship with our children. I think it's very rare that they would come up to us and say, listen, Mom, I think I'm really having a problem with this vape stuff. I can't go like an hour without it or whatever. So, in up against that, I would suggest getting another objective party involved. There are validated screening tools for nicotine, what we could call a nicotine use disorder, right? Is it mild, moderate, or severe, right? And that depends on a bunch of different factors according to the diagnostic criteria.
Is that something that a parent can find or share with their child, like online, that they can do themselves? Because that was one thing I wanted to say to my child was, take this test and see yourself. Don't rely on me. Take a test, see where you are in this, right?
Right. A very popular, I will say, cigarette screening questionnaire it's called the Fagerstrom. And what we did for our Nip It in the Bud program is we took the Fagerstrom and we altered it to include vaping. How many pods do you go through in a day? During one vaping session, how many pulls do you have? How soon after waking do you engage in, nicotine? So these kind of questions help us, and it's quantitative. So at the end we get a score, and that will kind of help us determine or understand what that severity is like. The Fagerstrom is available online, but like I said, it is focused on tobacco and cigarettes, and less so vaping or e-cigarette assessment.
Thank you.
So here we're talking. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. If you want to talk about this slide here.
Yeah, just super quick. It's important that, because Shannon brought this up before about the premature focusing, right? It's very important that we meet that our intervention, whatever our intervention is, matches the stage of change that my child is in, right? Because, and working at Center for Living, we meet adolescents and young adults that are along the spectrum of sort of readiness, right? There's some that are in pre-contemplation, where they're like, problem, what problem? And just to let you know, we all go through this cycle when we're looking to make a decision about behavior change. So pre-contemplation is problem, what problem? Contemplation is, yeah, maybe there's a problem and maybe I should do something about it. I might not be ready. Preparation is, okay, I need to do something. Let me start gathering some resources. Action is when I actually put the plan into motion. And maintenance is when I've kind of sustained this for a certain amount of time. What's important is that each one of these stages, there's kind of a time limit to it. Like contemplation, anything, like I've been contemplating joining a gym now for 2 years. Right? Well, chances are I'm not contemplating, I'm more in pre-contemplation, right? Or I've been preparing to go to the gym for 2 years. So it's really that 3 month limit. and it's important. So whenever especially working with adolescents, especially working with young adults, where and I will talk from the Center for Living perspective, a lot of our clients are coming to treatment for other substances, and nicotine dependence is just a given, right? They all come in vaping or smoking or something like that, I would say more often than not. And their perspective is, hey, you've taken away this substance, at least let me keep this one. And it's important when they don't see it as a problem, the best thing that you could do is provide education. Pre-contemplation, I need to provide the education. And this is where knowing the facts that I mentioned before is so important, right? Because we want to know essentially more than our youth in regards to what's happening, right? So that's the what, right? And I think as we move along, we're going to talk about the how, and the how really rests on the motivational interviewing, and please know that the definition of success when we're looking at the stages of change theory, by the way, developed by Prochaska and De Clemente out of Cape Cod Hospital, I think so. Where initially this came from a study that they were doing on smokers, where they were evaluating how come some people were able to just stop, whereas other people needed prolonged treatment. The idea was because they all were going through they were at different points in the stages of change, right? I have a client now who continues to vape, although they were hospitalized with EVALI 2 years ago, right? So their stage of change, although they're in relapse mode, is definitely more in the contemplation preparation than someone that has never experienced those negative consequences. So, and success is really attained through moving from one stage to another, right? So if my child is saying, I don't have a problem with vaping, it's fine, at least I'm not smoking, and I provide them education, and that moves them into contemplation, well, maybe there is an issue, mission accomplished, right?
I think it's okay to say, send articles to them, or,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to, we know scare tactics don't tend to work with kids, but so real articles that are educational, have real value and facts.
Right. No, I agree with that, Mimi. I agree with that. And I think that also, us really having mastery of that material and being able to present it in a digestible way to our youth is also very important. Because I could give my kid a research study, doesn't mean they'll exactly, dive in, necessarily.
Right. All right. So the next question, all related, is how do I keep this conversation going without it turning into a big power struggle? And that is, with teens, I think that's one of the hardest things that we do, not just with this conversation, but any conversation. I feel like the eye rolls and the pushback. How do we make it more collaborative and not feel like, because once you start a power struggle, I assume you've really lost it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is actually what is called the writing reflex, which is going into a situation and your desire to fix it, or almost go into it. You've already made this decision that you're right, overpowers, really engaging in it of itself. So of course, a teenager, some are more oppositional than others. This just they won't be receptive to that. And as soon as you get in that power struggle, it's important to take a pause and not continue. It's not gonna be effective, even if you find yourself going down that path of really wanting to be right. And especially if you come and you present the facts and you have all this evidence-based stuff with you and you're prepared and you've done all the work. And that's great, by the way, that's great. It's great if you've done your research and you are right in your facts, but the desire to be right instead of engaging in a conversation is definitely going to lead to a power struggle. And yes, you've already lost the battle there. So not the most effective approach, but hopefully, as we can continue and bring some more helpful suggestions than that. So yeah, I would also add that if you send an article, try and frame it in a way that's compassionate and curious. You can even joke about yourself and, like, oh, I'm sending you another article. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I hope you read it, versus we've worked with parents who will sit their kids down and make them read something or have that writing reflex and power struggle. And like, that's, as soon as that happens, they're not going to read it. But maybe with the right compassionate, I shouldn't use the word right, it's all about semantics here, but with the compassionate and curious approach, they will maybe read it on their own. That's actually a more effective way. So yes, this is what we call the writing reflex, and it's going to be the most unhelpful method.
And if I could throw something on there
Yeah.
too, thank you, Shannon. I think it's here that is where parents are most prone to come out of their own feelings and their own emotions. So before I address any kind of substance use with my child, it's very important to understand what are my feelings about this, right? Because invariably a lot of our lives are touched by addiction in one way or another. So I have to understand sort of what my feelings are, what my judgments are, right? Because we're looking for a judgment-free zone here, right? When you've said the phrase, "What's wrong with you?" You've already lost. You've already lost, and so it's important that we're able as adults to kind of check ourselves and understand that right now an impassioned plea might not be what our child needs, right? Especially if they're in pre-contemplation, we need non-judgmental feedback. We need facts.
Yeah, I realize so much of my response as a parent, whether it's this or something else, is fear-based. It comes from fear. So I'm afraid that they're going to have a bad pod, or they're going to have a bad reaction, or they're going to have long-term lung damage or brain damage, whatever. So it's hard to just pull back and give them patience and time to come through that circle on their own.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to sit on your hands.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we've gone through this already, but the sort of skills of motivational interviewing, have we addressed some of those?
Yeah, I think there's a couple points that will help these conversations. These are good pointers for having them. Avoid close-ended questions. So any question that would require a yes or no, like, do you like do you like to vape? Is this helping you with something? Those are yes or no questions versus why do you like to vape? What do you think it's helping you with? It helps them to, it helps. A non-motivated person will do very well at close-ended questions. The conversation will go nowhere, but an open-ended question will engage them and actually get them talking. Affirmations are important, especially from a parent. Having a parent highlight their child's strengths is huge. Sometimes with that fear-based response, it doesn't come out as easy, even though you're thinking all of the wonderful things that your kid is doing. If the conversation doesn't highlight any of that, it won't be as effective. And it's important for them to be reminded of their own strengths and that they are capable and that you think they're capable, because they do value your opinion, even if they don't always demonstrate that. And then reflecting. So, when they do talk, like, mirror back to them. That's a big skill we use as clinicians, is mirroring. Oh, are you saying that? So you're telling me that you're having trouble sleeping. Do you think it's because of this, or am I getting this right? Clarify things. Am I understanding this correctly, that you're saying this? Or it shows that you're actually engaging in the conversation. Also, you're not going in with an ulterior motive. And then at the end, you can summarize it. So, okay, well, what I think I heard was this. You told me A, B, and C. I'm going to repeat it back to you. Did I get it right? And that can help you. Actually, this is good to know, because this is something you are in control of, and it can feel good going into a conversation with these tangible skills. Would you add anything, John?
Yeah, the biggest thing, thank you, Shannon. The biggest thing is that in motivational interviewing, if I'm doing most of the talking, I'm not doing something right? So all of this is to get our kids talking, right? Reflections, right? You see where it says make guesses about about intended meaning, and that's exactly what Shannon said. So by making a guess, even if you guess wrong, it's now an opportunity for your child to correct you. No, actually, I meant this, which means that you're just getting more information while you're sort of affirming with them that you're actually listening, right? So, and it's through all of these, and then the summary can be really pointed, where you can pick out various things of what you spoke about to kind of help focus the conversation towards that planning stage, which we talked about before, right? The thing about
I can see as a parent, though, that there may be a situation here where none of this happens, where they just push back on everything. And
Yep.
maybe that's, I know we're going to get to a slide about resistance, so maybe that's where we're going, but there is that possibility, and it has happened to me. It's just complete pushback. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to have that conversation.
Mhm.
So I don't know what you recommend in that case. We can talk about, maybe that has to do with this next slide, which is, first of all, what if they, they don't even think they have a problem, and even if they did, they just, they're pushing back on you because they just don't want to talk about it. They don't
Right.
want to engage. They don't want to. Maybe they don't want to even know that they have a problem.
Exactly. That's most kids don't like to feel as though they're doing something wrong, right? And I think that's really, really important. Even in, when Shannon and I run Nip It in the Bud, we usually get youth that are talking about bad behavior, good behavior, right? So that's really the frame. But we talk healthy, unhealthy. We don't talk bad, good, right? This is not moral. This is not a judgment. The role, really resistance in motivational interviewing. Actually, if you read the third edition of Miller and Rolnick's motivational interviewing, they don't like the word resistance. They don't use resistance anymore, right? Because resistance puts the onus on one person, right? And I picked this picture on purpose, right? Who has the problem here, right? So you think, oh, it's that kid with the backwards hat and the folded arms, right? That he's obviously resistant, but maybe whoever is doing the talking is not approaching this in the right way, right? And that's very important to kind of focus on, is that the word that they like to use now instead of resistant is discord, right? It's showing that whatever I'm doing, it's not working. And as parents, I think we know that feeling. We know when that door closes with our kid, that glaze over look in their eye, that sigh, that sucking teeth, the like you said, Mimi, like the rolling of the eyes. That's we all see it, right? So when we experience this resistance, and the idea is, and this is where active listening comes in, when we experience this, right, it means that whatever we're doing is not working, right? So then we have to reset, and we have to go back, and we have to say, okay, so how else can I approach this? Maybe even looking at it from, maybe this right now is not the right time. Maybe they're super stressed. Maybe they're relying on their vape to get them through their exam or whatever. And so addressing this is not the right time. So giving them the autonomy of saying, maybe we can address this at another time. Giving them that space could be extremely empowering, right? So we all know signs of resistance: interruption, seeming distraction, looking at your cell phone, right? We know the defensiveness, and it's an energy thing, right? We know when we've turned somebody off.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go through this? This is equally helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Talk about what doesn't work.
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, I think actually, John, do you want to take this one? I
Yeah,
think
of
it's
course.
helpful. I'm feeling that it's helpful from the parent perspective yourself, because I'm not a parent. So I always love hearing that. But I will say that that third party, which can often be a therapist, I will say that is helpful in this dynamic, because I think of my role. I was reflecting on my role, and I think about how many times I remind my clients, your parent is coming from a very worried place, regardless of how it's coming off on the outside. it comes from a genuine good place on the inside. So I want to add that, but take
Well,
it
do you
away,
feel
John.
that- Do you
Yeah.
feel that if you just don't feel like you're getting through as a parent, you think maybe an aunt or uncle or a friend could be more effective in that case?
Oh, that's an interesting point. Possibly, whether it's through, yeah, I actually do. I thought, when you first asked that, I thought, would it be more effective for them to remind maybe your role, but that could definitely be a possibility if there's a close
Sometimes it's
person in the
just
family
not,
they trust. Yeah, if they
Yeah.
could be harnessed as a strength, absolutely.
right, or a coach or, somebody.
Yeah, as long as you're working together and not splitting, and
Right,
them
yeah,
going just
yeah.
to them instead of you. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I can. First off, I really like the meme that I used. I really like it. But I can share from my own experience. We my 14-year-old struggles with self-esteem and things like that. So we have been advocating for therapy for a very long time. Now imagine being the child of a therapist where you're advocating for therapy. It gets to the point where I can't even use reflections when talking to my kids because they yell for my wife, he's doing it again, so it just doesn't work. But I will say that every time we've addressed this with my daughter and recommended therapy, oh, I don't want therapy, I no, I don't need it. She goes for her annual physical with her pediatrician, who does a depression screening with her, as part of her routine checkup. And they go, and she said, look, what, this time of your life is very difficult. There's a lot of changes going on. Sometimes it would be beneficial to talk to someone. And she said, you know what, probably you're right. And now she's met someone that she really has a good bond with, and it's working. And I'm pretty much sure that she was amenable to it because it didn't come from me, right? It didn't come from the parent, and I think that's important, right? So if we are engaging in this conversation with our children, and we know that we're getting resistance, right? So what do? We get frustration. Can't you see what a big deal this is? Right? A lot of the work that Shannon and I do is, we see the client on the train tracks, we see the train coming, and we're like, you might want to look out for, just be careful that the train, it might be, and they could just be completely oblivious. But persuasion doesn't work, right? If I say, oh, come on, yeah, that doesn't work, right? The importance or urgency of the problem from our perspective, again, that impassioned plea might not be helpful. The benefits, of changing the behavior, they might not just be open to it right then and there. So persuasion is not effective, and it really kind of tugs on that tug of war, and so automatically our children will tug back. And again, that writing reflex, right? Of I know what I know it's good for you, and you should listen to me. Is sort of that I can say that word.
Authentic.
No, authoritative.
Authoritative.
Yes. So it's very important, that we don't engage in that. And again, we are looking to be partners here. We're looking to meet, what they say, meet our child where they're at. And if I'm coming out of a writing reflex, if I'm saying I'm the parent and you should be listening to me, then that's going to turn them off. It's interesting. There's different types of therapy. Some look at it as directive therapy. Some are more like I said, like the Rogerian, idea of, let the client go where they will and I will follow them. I would say that motivational interviewing is really in the middle of that road where we're guiding, right? They call it dancing, not wrestling, right? Where it might be, like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, but it's being able to really tune into my child and see where they're at in that moment, and look for that opportunity to have that open and honest conversation with them.
And I would say the hardest part is assessing where they're at, because you might have them in preparation one day, and you giving them the facts and talking about the urgency of the problem might be really effective. And then the next day they might really feel against that and be resistant. So, we applaud you for going on this journey and trying to gauge where they might be at, and really thinking about those stages of change, and where they're at. That is where you go. They can actually guide you to what you need to do.
Sounds like it's not a linear process.
No, sorry.
So I know we're running out of time. We've run out of time, but we have one more question I really want to get to, because I don't know what kid is not stressed these days. I feel like there's so many stressors, and COVID has really elevated it for everybody in terms of isolation and all of that. So are there alternatives that you can suggest that for this particular parent, and I'm sure other parents have the same question, that might be helpful?
Yeah. So for this, this sort of ties into the program we offer, because we pay special focus on incorporating specifically exercise and drinking water into the beginning stages of our program, mostly because of the endorphins with exercise. And then the water helps our clients to start thinking about physical health. And then eventually they think about nutrition, and all of that will help alleviate stress. But I think something I've noticed that kids who abuse substances or use nicotine, they might have lost interest in hobbies. And I think there's such a power in leisure activities, hobbies. Like if they're not going to be vaping, what are they doing? And what is a fun, pleasant activity that they may not be doing? And this is actually a really good time, especially after what we've been through in this pandemic. These kids have lost their opportunity, or they lost it for a while, to be able to do things they loved. So really, this is sort of a golden opportunity to bring them back into doing fun hobbies, exercise. I want to be careful about that, because again, you don't want to push them to go on a run. If it's coming from you, that might not feel positive. But there's like the power, again, this is going to sound so cliche, the power of going on a walk, or just moving your body, doing something that's not sitting watching Netflix and using your vape all day, changing up the patterns and the habits, but not just something that is healthy and unenjoyable. I really want to stress the importance of doing something enjoyable, something they really like to do, or used to enjoy before this pandemic.
Great.
What do you think, John?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. We also start a lot of our groups off with a mindfulness activity, which really is helpful to center them, because invariably we're going to take the clients that we work with in the program, we take them through helping them understand what's going on for them that's sort of triggering this need in this moment to vape, right? And when, because a lot of the kids that we work with, they vape just because that's what they do. It's become just habit at this point. But there was a time where they vaped for a specific reason. Like, I vape to feel this, I vape to feel that. And they've lost touch with the understanding of what their body, what their emotions are asking for in that moment, and being able to be mindful to apply some healthy coping skills to those emotions. Thereby, there's decreased reliance on the nicotine to sort of anesthetize the problem.
Well, this is a perfect segue into the next slide, which is our second to last slide, which is really just if you want to spend just 2 minutes talking about your program and what how it's, because it has been effective for you all. It's quite new, but wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our Nip It in the Bud program, it's 5 weeks. John and I co-facilitate. So the sessions take place Tuesday, Thursday. This is intentional. We want there to be at least 2 touch points per week as we move through this 5-week program, which is a total of 10 sessions, in order to keep people engaged, especially if we're talking about something on a Tuesday, we want to re-engage them on a Thursday. We use curriculum from the American Lung Association. So John and I are both trained facilitators in this curriculum. We discuss a lot of what we've talked about today, but mostly from their perspective, not as much the parent perspective. We talk about the negative impact on physical health, mental and emotional health, also financial. That's a big one that I actually think is pretty effective. And as we talked about the stages of change, we're seeing a lot of contemplation. So education is key here. We use a lot of motivational interviewing. And I will say, with the several rounds we've had, we do see a lot of our clients move from contemplation all the way through action. We don't work with them long enough often to get to maintenance, especially for those of those clients who come just for this program. They're not already working with us. But we really do see results, and we talk about also how to tackle if you don't meet your goal and you do end up vaping, how can we reduce shame and encourage you to get right back on again? So,
Great
you know, it's a
point.
very non-judgmental, warm, inviting environment.
Yeah,
That's our goal. Mhm.
it's a great point about shame, because I know that's very common with
It
not
is.
just youth, but well, this has been incredibly enlightening. I'm sorry we are running out of time to get to more questions, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We can always filter also questions through to John and Shannon if there's anything specific to them. If we could ask you, I know we're losing time here, but if you can fill out this one poll question that's on your screen. And also we would love feedback and love you to join our community. If you want to volunteer, do what I'm doing, which is educating and moderating or advocating for in your own communities, please just scan that QR code. Everyone knows how to do it now with COVID. Scan that QR code, fill out the survey, and let us know that you're interested, and we'd love to get in touch. So thank you all for joining us. We hope this was helpful. I know I learned a lot from this today, and hope that we can all apply this to better relationships with our own kids, regardless of whether they have, you know, a dependency on nicotine or anything else. So thank you both very much. Thanks, John and Shannon, and thanks, Christina, for being behind the scenes there. We really appreciate everything you all are doing, and best of luck. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.